Not the prelude, but just practicing.
Yeah.
No, okay. Keep going. Shine
Avery.
everywhere, its temple of space.
Is it too loud?
Too loud? Oh.
Hold on. Is it too, it's good? Or is it too much?
That wasn't like full voice, but
No, that's good.
yeah, okay.
This one's okay too? Yeah, okay. No, sorry, we're doing the
Welcome to Sunday worship at the First Unitarian Congregation of Ottawa. My name is Kate. I'm delighted to be your worship associate this morning. Whether you're taking part in this worship celebration from your home or wherever else you may be, whenever you may log on, you are welcome here. We acknowledge that our FirstU campus is located on traditional, unsurrendered, and unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, and that the work of reconciliation is a responsibility of our congregation and of all Canadians. Our goal is to educate ourselves and all who have ears to hear, to be of service to those who are at risk, and to advocate for justice. Do take care and take advantage of online opportunities at FirstU to stay in touch during this protracted pandemic. If you are new to FirstU and would like to learn more about us, please contact us through our email at welcome@firstunitarianottawa.ca. And Dory is at the welcome table if you are here in Worship Hall and can also provide information. Following our service, please join us as well for Hospitality Hour. And now here's Amy from our board with announcements for today. Here's Amy.
Hello, everybody. And as usual, I can never content myself to do one thing, so just thought I'd put that out there. There's only 2 board announcements this morning. The first has to do with the fact that our annual general meeting is coming up on May 1st. It'll be on Zoom again, and there are some finance and I believe the, what is the other one? The motions, there'll be like subgroup meeting things going on beforehand. If you want any information about any of that, it is in the EUU. You can look there. And the other announcement is about the online auction. It's starting today. It's being opened today. And it's going until Thursday, April 21st. So go to www.bytown.com to look at all the great things that are on there. And you can help our fundraising for the congregation to sustain the life of our community by donating or bidding on items there. And now we have a very special announcement from the Environment Action Group from Donna. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Okay, it's already the week 4 challenge is here, which is plastic-free bathroom and laundry. Lots to do there. Okay, where there are bathrooms, there is toilet tissue. And toilet tissue is an issue. Now, Phil loves the soft and strong, but reflect on the 27,000 trees per day, mostly old growth, that is flushed. Then there's the copious plastic wrapping, and often twice over. Oh, poor choice, Phil. But good news. You can find 100% recycled tissue. Some of it's even packed plastic-free, or you can go whole hog. Ed has discovered non-tree paper made from bamboo, wrapped plastic-free, in decorated paper even. And it's complete with jokes. Who gives a crap is the company. You can buy it in bulk cardboard if you like it well. Okay, so good work, Ed. Yay. So see some more great ideas to reduce plastics in the EUU and on the climate action page. And just one more thing, we've had a glitch. None of your how's it going messages have made it to me. So please resend them using the corrected link in the EUU so I can post them for you at the back. And for the rest of you who are here, please post how you're doing. How is it going on the back poster boards there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Donna, Ed, and Phil, for your announcement and encouragement. During the continuing pandemic, we encourage you to sign up to receive the EUU, our weekly email newsletter. Check our Facebook and Instagram pages and our web page for notices and updates. Our calendar continues to be as full as ever, albeit much of it online. Whatever your heritage, whatever your faith, whomever you love, and however you identify, today you are part of our spiritual community.
Bonjour, mes amis. Good morning, one and all. Welcome to our weekly service here from Worship Hall. To those here and everyone watching from wherever they may be. I'm the Reverend Eric Meter, this congregation's lead pastor, and this morning we light our chalice to these words adapted from her poem, Imaginary Conversation by Linda Paston. You tell me to live each day as if it were my last. This in the kitchen, where before coffee I complain of the day ahead, that obstacle race of minutes and hours, grocery stores and doctors. But why the last, I ask? Why not live each day as if it were the first, all raw astonishment? Eve rubbing her eyes awake that first morning, the sun rising like a newborn star in the east. You grind the coffee with the small roar of a mind trying to clear itself. I set the table, glance out the window where dew has baptized every living surface, and I light a flame, a single flame, one that holds our hopes and the possibilities awaiting us all. And now our opening hymn, Be Ours a Religion. For those here in Worship Hall, please feel free to hum along. For those elsewhere, if you have a hymnal with you, the song is number 1058 in our teal hymnal.
Thank you, Jen. The call to worship this morning is the poem, What to Remember When Waking by David White. In that first hardly noticed moment in which you wake, coming back to this life from the other, more secret, movable, and frighteningly honest world where everything began, there's a small opening into the new day, which closes the moment you begin your plans. What you can plan is too small for you to live. What you can live wholeheartedly will make plans enough for the vitality hidden in your sleep. To be human is to become visible while carrying what is hidden as a gift to others. To remember the other world in this world is to live in your true inheritance. You are not a troubled guest on this earth. You are not an accident amid other accidents. You were invited from another and greater night than one from which you have just emerged. Now, looking through the slanting light of the morning window toward the mountain presence of everything that can be, what urgency calls you to your one love? What shape waits in the seed of you to grow and spread its branches against a future sky? Is it waiting in the fertile sea, in the trees beyond the house, in the life you can imagine for yourself. Wherever it is that waits for each of us, let us dare to meet it now in these shared moments. Come, let us worship together.
Reverend Ellen Bell normally leads our weekly time set aside for joys and sorrows. I am not Reverend Ellen Bell. She is under the weather this morning and asked me to sub in. Amid the backdrop of our lives, winter's slow releasing hold, the slow arrival of springtime, a world that knows war and hunger as well as majesty, we take this time to place small stones in a bowl of water, letting the ripples go out to the edge of the bowl and beyond our space into the universe, signs of our care. This morning, I want to lift up our nation's loss in the hit-and-run death of the composer Boris Brott in Hamilton. He died on April 5th. As Ellen wrote about him, Boris was 2 years older than me and, like me, was from Montreal. I remember well when he came on the scene as a young man, he was the talk of the town. Unfortunately, Ellen continues, I never saw him conduct such a sad way to die and way too young. A stone for Boris Brott. And a stone also for the people in Ukraine living amid invasion, for those that have fled their homeland, and those all over Europe and beyond who are taking in the refugees, providing them shelter and caring homes. We'll also place a stone for all that remains unsaid still in the silent depths of our hearts, for these celebrations and sorrows we also honor. And now let us find a place of stillness as we rest for a long little moment, and let whatever will arise, arise.
Hi to everyone, it's Nao, your Director of Religious Exploration. Today I'm reading to you a short story and it's titled Enemy Pie. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline and I wasn't even invited. But my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too, but he knew of a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell me how, I'll show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. Enemy pie, he said, satisfied. You may be wondering, what exactly is enemy pie? I was wondering too, but Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kind of things, disgusting things, would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he needed those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing on all morning. He gave it right back to me. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me, and all the while I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really good. And as far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a bit confused. I went to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out, or their breath stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. He talked quietly. There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. Can you play? I asked. He looked confused. I'll go ask my mom, he said. He came back with his shoes in hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble, she said, smiling. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls, but we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. After lunch, we went over to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice, but of course I couldn't tell Dad that, since he had worked so hard to make this enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game just to be nice. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house and into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my treehouse. My treehouse was my treehouse. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And if Jeremy wanted in, can we go in it, he asked. I knew he was going to ask me that, but he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list, and enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. Okay, I said, but hold on. I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and when he came to get us, we tried to hide from him, but somehow he found us. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should forget about enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut the pie into 8 thick slices. Dad, I said, it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood. I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed one to me and one to Jeremy. Wow, Jeremy said, looking at the pie. My dad never makes pies like this. It was at the point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. Jeremy, don't eat it. It's a bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something. Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumbled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. I felt relieved. I had saved his life. I was a hero. If it's so bad, Jeremy asked, then why has your dad already eaten half of it? I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. Good stuff, he mumbled through a mouthful, and that was all he said. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing. Jeremy was happily eating, and neither of them was losing any hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or if their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll get an answer because I just lost my best enemy. I hope everyone enjoyed this short story. Please check the EU for RE activities. Next Sunday, we will be having our Easter egg hunt following the service. Have a great Sunday.
The reading is taken from The Exquisite Risk by Mark Nebo. For years, I've been trying to explore and understand how can we, being forgetfully human, remember we are of one human family? How can we stay awake and authentic when our wounds make us numb and hidden? How can we minimize what stands between us and our experience of life? How can we make a practice of wearing down what thickens around our mind and heart? How can this practice of staying authentic serve and draw strength from the universal whole while we are immersed and entangled in the moment of our lives? As a cancer survivor, I have found myself like Lazarus, awake again in the same earthly place, but different. Everything has changed, and nothing has changed. This wakefulness has led me to be a student of that vibrant edge where our inner life meets the world. When struggling through my illness, I was bereft at how many of the books I owned were useless. Ever since, I've been committed to finding and creating books that can help us live.
Tools for the work at hand. What do I know about tools? Look at my hands. These are not the hands of someone who uses tools for a living beyond a keyboard and a phone. And in the years before our continuing pandemic, the hands were tools themselves as I reached out to console and to encourage. I have two little stories about tools for you this morning. The first is a very small one, which may shed a little light on the nature of a group of people. The second is about the creativity, fed by necessity, of a people under threat. One day when I was 7-ish, about Jeremy's age, I imagine, my family's congregation, a small lay-led Unitarian fellowship, hosted an international foods lunch. People set up stations in various rooms of the converted house where the group met. One of those stations was dedicated to Oriental foods. There may have been sushi rolls and or dim sum, but all I remember was a vase full of chopsticks next to a large glass bowl full of M&Ms. A man I didn't know well told me I could have all the M&Ms I wanted, but I had to use the chopsticks to pick them out of the bowl. Obviously, that man didn't know me very well either. While I had never seen, let alone heard of chopsticks before, I was motivated. At first, I was completely and literally all fingers, but it wasn't long before I was beginning to figure it out. Those M&Ms were mine. When my parents came by and put an end to my chocolate rating, when my parents came by, they put an end to my chocolate rating, but I think they had smiles on the inside almost as large as my ear-to-ear smile on the outside. Tools like chopsticks help us get what we want. They help us reach what we dream for. Tools are important. Ask any carpenter or mechanic, or ask any soldier. During my comments to you, when Putin's war on Ukraine was still then days old, I mentioned that I expect Zelensky and the Ukrainian people to give the world a master class on active resistance. I'm not usually as spot on as I was in that moment. One of the tools that Ukrainian civilians have been using in concert with their military are drones. Not only the large armed ones that Ukraine has purchased from Turkey, but the much smaller hobbyist photo and videography ones used throughout the world. A week or two into the war, photo and video hobbyists in Ukraine reached out to their international brethren, asking them to help by sending their drones, their used drones, so that the people of Ukraine could use them to defend themselves. These drones have begun arriving, primarily via Poland, to help civilian and military resistance fighters spot Russian troops and armored movements from the air. They've already begun recording atrocities, such as civilians with arms raised, shot down in cold blood. Never discount the right tool, used well at the right time. Now, that's this morning's introduction to tools. Just remember, the tools are not always just physical things. Now I have another sort of story for you, a tale, in fact, in which I'll begin to explore the "for the work at hand" portion of my address to you this morning. Here's a tale, one that is very much still unfolding, its end too far off to see clearly. There's a small group of people who have met together weekly for just under 125 years. Parents and children and elders. At one time there were as many children as adults, but that time is no longer. The group may be a little out of balance for that, but that part of the tale is for another day. Truth be told, there had been more adults in the group as well before, and some are concerned about this, but the group has always been, in the grand scheme of things, small in size. Small in size, but grand in what it sets out to do. Over the years, the group, who first met near the center of the city in which they lived, moved a little ways west, came this way. Got some land just up from the southern bank of a wide, graceful river. You can see it out there. Here the group had not just a building, but grounds, trees, space for the children to play in, and paths for anyone to walk upon and enjoy the restorative beauty surrounding them. In time, this group gave birth to 2 offspring. The first, a nursery to care for young souls. For years, the nursery lived where the parent group gathered, but in time they built a home of their own nearby. The second offspring was a home for elders, also built nearby, but even closer to the main house. The elders loved their views of the river and walking the tree-lined paths, remembering days good and bad, and all the love they had done their best to bring into the world. But the parent group wasn't only the parent to these offspring. No, they engaged in other work as well. They helped people from far away who had been in danger in their own homelands, established lives and families in this city. But life never stays the same, not for long anyway. The city was growing. Its roots were expanding as well as its branches. When people grow tunnels and tall homes, it is loud and muddy for years. Trees are lost along the way. The group's offspring grew worried. Their parents, who had been talking about inviting others to live nearby for years, had begun actively making plans to do so. These children, these offspring, these 2 separate groups gave their parents the gift of voicing their anxiety, their concerns. And here I'm going to have to leave the telling of this little tale. By now, those of you who have been around at all know what I'm getting at. It's time to talk plain. This is a congregation, a community that's not afraid to go big. It seems ingrained in your DNA, and I love that about you. You walk your talk. Now, I've told you again recently that I'm a lifelong Unitarian Universalist. I've seen many congregations in my time talk big and do little. I've seen many of our congregations, I've seen many leave our congregations because of exactly that. And here we are, with plans in development that include, at heart, plans to create low-income housing on land that this faith community now owns. That's a bold way to walk your talk. And it is timely as well. With the Canadian Unitarian Council's recent vote to add an 8th principle to its original 7, the 8th being to dismantle systems that allow racism to continue, if not flourish. Pair that with this congregation's own commitment to pursue reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous peoples. We are primed to go big once more. But what of our hearts? This last week, I met with both some leaders of the River Parkway's Children's Center and with members of our congregation's board of directors, the board of the Unitarian House next door. During these conversations, concerns were brought to us from River Parkway that we may want them to move into one of the buildings being considered. In part, what would that mean to the ease with which their young ones play outdoors each day? In part. And from Unitarian House, that their space might be encroached upon and that their sense of safety might be affected. One of the phrases used to explain the nature of their concern was that our plans, ideas still, seem to hang a sword of Damocles over their heads. I want everyone to hear the depth of that concern, a sword hanging by a thread over their heads. I repeat that not to stop us, not to say we shouldn't do what we're hoping to do, but as a sign that we need to proceed with care. In this, the Unitarian House Board and the leadership of River Parkway have given us real, tangible gifts. As I found myself saying more in recent weeks, the preschool at the congregation I served in Columbus, Ohio, the School for Young Children, had a saying written on the wall outside their largest classroom, reading, "In times of uncertainty or conflict, increase communication." Before our ancestors of long, long ago used rocks or fire, communication, even before language, was their first tool. It remains our most powerful one. Let me ask you, members and friends of this faith community, a question now. If we are going to take our talk seriously and begin to walk it, to welcome neighbors of rich and varied backgrounds, do we feel ready? Are we ready to do so? Of course, readiness is seldom complete. It's not a fixed thing. And in much of life, we find ourselves, to use a phrase of the German philosopher Heidegger, thrown into situations in which we find ourselves having to navigate and act without a guide or map. But it can help to at least begin to prepare ourselves. Those working to promote the adoption of our eighth principle did so for years, systematically. It was not easy work. I've heard some of how dispiriting it was for those involved, and I know I've only encountered the tip of that iceberg. To work against systems of ingrained racialization in which the perspectives of some are counted as more than the stated experiences of others is the work of cultural change. Not everyone is willing or perhaps even ready to take that on. As a Unitarian Universalist all my life, I've seen us grow and I've seen us soar. I've also seen us close ranks and step back. A joke that has been told from this pulpit twice in recent memory sums it up this way. Universalists believe that a loving God would never damn anyone to hell. And Unitarians believe they're too good to be damned. That too good part is the problem, and it's a tricky one. In a culture of perfectionism, placing undue importance on being right, that nature, that aspect of culture is not going to serve us well as we might hope or expect, which is perhaps an awkward way of saying something that can be said more clearly. Perfectionism is the first component, the primary component of what we mean when we talk about white supremacy culture. It breeds brittleness and exclusivity. We can do better by allowing ourselves and others to be fallible human beings. Now, I say this cautiously. I have pushed myself all my life to be as good as I can be. I have pushed myself to learn the ways that make me seen, be perceived as competent. Those gains have been hard won. And what I'm facing is that those habitual ways of acting and speaking are only going to get in the way of where I need to go, where I feel we need to go. We have some deep learning to do. I've heard the phrase unlearning used for this. I don't believe in unlearning. You can't unlearn anything in my experience. You can only practice new ways often enough that someday they become habitual. For those of us, and as I've just said, I'm including myself here, who pride themselves on being good, we're going to have to not lower our standards, but expand our standards. We're going to have to place greater value on equitable relationships, of being equitable, equal partners going forward, not in being smarter than anyone else in the room. This congregation's relational covenant states in part, I will strive to honor our congregational covenant and the principles of Unitarian Universalism by listening, assuming good intentions, remembering that people differ in their perspectives, previous experience, and communication styles. Assuming good intentions. Not remembering that I had previously read that phrase in the congregation's covenant, I had written down the same phrase on a sticky note and placed it at the bottom of my computer screen. This was going to be something that I knew I would have to return to in my work with you again and again. And when that first little sticky note grew brittle and fell off, I wrote the phrase down on another little yellow sheet and put it back up where the first one had been. Yet assuming good intentions of one another will only get us so far. We also need to consider the impact of what we say and do. In my life as a Unitarian Universalist, I've seen intention supersede impact time and time again. Friends, if we want to relate to others outside our walls, we are going to have to give more weight to impact. We need to take more responsibility for what we say and what we do. When we say something that hurts someone else, it doesn't mean we're bad. It simply means there's something to learn. In working to promote our new eighth principle, Mary Byron writes, my Unitarian Universalist faith has been an important part of the spiritual journey of my life. I believe in our principles and our way of expressing them publicly, advocating for the world of justice, equity, and compassion we know is possible. And we know this world is not yet here, which calls us into doing the work that is needed to create it. She continues, I also do this work because I find such joy in the community of people engaged here. The guiding principle above speaks to how white supremacy culture inhibits connection and creativity. Breaking down my personal barriers and connecting with people is a liberation for my heart. Superiority feeds our egos and it shrinks our hearts. I don't want to live in a small-hearted world, she concludes. Now that's work I want to be part of. what I want this congregation to continue being part of. Tools for the work at hand, listening, considering the impact of what we say and do, daring to live big-hearted lives. Now these are worthy of our heritage, worthy of our long-standing promise. If there are going to be mistakes along the way, moments in which we say something ill-advised, moments where we slip and fall face first, and I guarantee you there will be moments just like that, and maybe worse ahead, may they come as we are leaning into becoming as big-hearted people as we can. Come, let's take this journey together. Amen.
I'd like to invite Chalice Choir up for our anthem, after which they'll be staying for the hymn as well. Today is a setting of a Mozarabic Easter Eve prayer by composer Elizabeth Alexander. And I'll read the text for you now. Hear us, O never failing light. May our souls be lamps of thine, kindled and illuminated by thee. May they shine and burn with truth and never go out in ashes. May we be thy dwelling, shining from thee, shining in thee. May we shine and fail not. May we ever worship thee. May we shine forth inwardly. And may the light of perpetual faith abide in us.
Thank you very much, Chalice and Jen. This congregation has a long history of care, vitality, and bringing people together to move the arc of justice forward. We have been able to live into our hopes and dreams because of the generosity of those within and beyond this community. Whether you are here in Worship Hall or anywhere else at all, you are part of this community. To make a gift in support of the work of this congregation, you don't need to use the baskets that will soon be making their way among our pews. Wherever you are invited to go to our website or contact our finance manager to find out how to make a donation or keep up with your pledge. Our gifts are freely given and gratefully received. We dedicate these gifts to the work of this community of faith, serving human wholeness, caring for the planet, upholding religious freedom, welcoming the stranger, loving one another. And now our closing hymn, Be That Guide. Again, for those here in Worship Hall, please feel free to hum along. For those elsewhere, if you have a hymnal with you, the song is number 124 in our gray hymnal.
Thank you. Voices raised in song. Nothing better. Before we close this time of worship and reflection, a reminder that our online hospitality hour will begin at 11:30. As we extinguish our chalice this morning, let us return to the words of Linda Pastum with which we lit our chalice. You tell me to live each day as if it were my last. But why the last? Why not live each day as if it were the first? All raw astonishment, Eve rubbing her eyes awake that first moment. In such a moment, what might we begin to see? What might we begin to do? This morning's chalice is extinguished, but our connections and our faith remain. With that said, Jen, and I think you've got maybe some backup singers, please bless us once more. My friends, reach out to those here with you. Reach out to those beyond these walls, wherever you may be. Go in peace. Go in love. Go in joy. Go forward with hearts ready to grow, practicing the art of expanding the care and vision of our community of faith so that we can increase the odds that someday all really will be well. And now our postlude.